Hey everybody, Brian Von VA back at it again. This time we're talking about what feats are usually considered to be overpowered in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. The lucky feat is one of the most controversial out there. Roll your dice. Ponder the shitty outcome. Give it a big fat old raspberry and roll again. 3 times per day. Every day. Ability checks, attack rolls, saving throws, and that's just the start. Even my cat agreed a minute ago. It also works the other way around. The great demon lord rolls a natural 20 on a ranged attack with his instant death ray ability. Ponder that outcome for about 1 nanosecond. Then give the great demon lord a big old fat raspberry and force him to roll again. In a game defined by dice, that is unquestionably one heck of an ability. But is it overpowered? I think that there are a few things to ponder here. Now, on one hand, it's not perfect, just really good. Something like a lesser, more flexible version of a creature's legendary resistance. But it can still fail. Rolling 2 1s in a row is a thing that does happen. Rolling 2 20s in a row is also a thing that does happen. Big Daddy might still turn you into a meat-scented pile of smoldering ash. Luck won't win over a massive power imbalance in the long run. Now, on the other hand, this is one of those squiggly abilities that tends to get pretty out of hand. It exists without any level of moderation or restriction regardless of other circumstances. So, my little kobold fighter imposes disadvantage with his groveling and scrapping. The big boss of the dungeon still rolls an 18 and a 19. Nothing stopping our heroic little dragon spawn from forcing yet another roll with the lucky feat. Imagine a halfling wizard with the bountiful luck racial trait, lucky feat, and a bunch of divination spells. There's just extra dice flying every which way all the time. Who can even tell anymore who is advantaged and who is disadvantaged? Bada 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 bada. It can begin to approach the point of becoming straightforward dice shopping. The breadth of this ability is also an issue. The lucky feat applies to essentially any d20 roll. There are lots of abilities that impose advantage and disadvantage, but few with the same scope and flexibility. It works on skill checks, it works on attack rolls, it works on saving throws, it works on Cusco. You can use it to avoid spell failures, make blind guesses about things you know nothing about, win at gambling, avoid traps, dodge hostile spell effects, jump out of the way of Ugrit the Destroyer's battle axe, seduce tavern wenches, seduce beholders, oh my, seduce gelatinous cubes, oh yeah, seduce Ugrit the Destroyer, seduce the lucky feat is one heck of an ability. There's no way around that. Aside from losing out on picking another feat, there really isn't a downside. This feat is always useful in all circumstances and settings. No matter where you are or what you are doing, the ability to roll again when things aren't going your way will be handy. Incidentally, I forgot to mention, this is the only ability which can turn disadvantage into super advantage. Allow me to walk you through the process. Cue the whiteboard. My heroic kobold has imposed disadvantage on your noble and lucky halfling. You roll a natural 20. You then roll a 2 on your disadvantage roll. But then you apply, bada boom, the lucky feat, and roll a 3rd time, getting a, I don't know, it's a 10. The lucky feat lets you pick from any of those dice. Disadvantage, which is meant to be a penalty, turns into a free natural 20. All of this leans heavily in favor of lucky being very overpowered. But let me finish. As useful as this is, it can only be applied 3 times a day. If the DM loads the session with lots of traps, a bunch of skill checks, 10 or 12 tough encounters, and a boss battle, then lucky is very helpful, but not game-breakingly so. It can definitely get you out of a very tight spot, but it might still fail some of those rolls, and there are a lot of opportunities to waste it. If you don't have that kind of time and can only squeeze in a 4 or 5 encounters in a session before calling it a day, then lucky is considerably more potent. In conclusion, the lucky feat is sometimes OP, and sometimes not, depending on the circumstances. It can become a cornerstone for a certain kind of potentially irritating sort of power gamer who just wants to screw with the dice. Imagine this feat, along with a bunch of divination spells, in the hands of an actual asshole! Yeah, just ponder that one for a bit. This is one of those abilities that can be hella fun though. I built a kobold wizard almost completely around this feat. Really leaned into his koboldness too. He was a cackling, greedy, sniveling little bastard who walked around with ridiculously extravagant-looking robes, fake glass jewels inlaid into his scales, which he claimed were real, and a gaudy wig made of artificial gold feathers, which he claimed were not only real, but actually naturally his real feathers. He only counted as good because rich people treated him like shit. Robbing them was more satisfying anyway, and poor people were more than happy to lavish praise on his money, overlooking the fact that he was basically a monster as long as he was willing to spread it around. Now, he was hilariously brilliant. I manually rolled his stats and just happened on a 20 intelligence, but otherwise, pretty cowardly and lazy. The only thing he had going for him was his bizarre good luck. I think the lucky feat is something that really depends on the players and the type of game they want to play. If it's a congenial RP heavy game where everyone understands that wacky things can happen, then that's fine. If it's an intentional bunch of power gamers and someone wants to power game in this way, then that's fine. But if everyone isn't on the same page, then it could be a bit problematic if one player is constantly getting their way at the expense of everyone else. But I'm in no position to complain. It's a fun feat and I've used it before to hilarious, excellent effect. Oh, and I also forgot. Lucky also makes you virtually immune to critical hits. Huh. Anytime an enemy rolls a critical hit on their attack roll, you can just say, nope, and force them to roll again. The odds against ever successfully landing a crit against someone with a lucky feat are very low, unless they simply allow it because the damage is too minimal to bother negating. The first thing to note is that there is a huge difference between things that are to be considered overpowered and things that are actually overpowered. The first one that comes to mind as generally being considered overpowered is the lucky feat, as above. 3 times per long rest. When you make an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, or an enemy makes an attack roll against you, you can choose to roll another d20, and use either the roll from that d20 or the original roll. This is considered overpowered as it's advantage on demand, and because it can turn disadvantage into super advantage, or advantage into super disadvantage for an enemy attack. The problem with lucky is that it's 3 times per long rest. Now, game design wise, you should be doing minimum 6 encounters per long rest. On average, 3 turns per encounter, you're looking at least 2 rolls per turn at low levels. 1 attack against you, 1 from you, and much more at higher levels, 2 to 3 attacks against you, 4 from you, a couple of saving throws, reaction attacks or effects, bonus action effects, you get the picture. You end up with 36 to 144 rolls per long rest. The player gets to re-roll 3 of them. Even then, while advantage is strong, it doesn't hold up to some of the other effects you can get. Now, this certainly is a good feat, and it's one that's nice to always have. But it isn't really a must-have feat for anyone. In fact, oftentimes, just going for an ASI in your primary stat or dexterity could serve you better. The other 2 that often come up in such discussions are Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter. These 2 feats provide the option of getting plus 10 damage on a weapon attack at the cost of -5 to hit. They also come with some nice secondary effects, with Great Weapon Master offering a bonus action attack, under certain circumstances of course, and Sharpshooter allowing you to ignore cover and long-range penalties. Again, I don't think these are really OP though. They are certainly more influential than lucky. These are must-have feats for martial damage builds in 5th edition. But this doesn't push martials ahead of casters. It more so allows them to keep up better at higher levels. They are amazing feats, but they don't break the game. There are, of course, other amazing feats like Warcaster, but the above are the main ones I see talked about as being OP. I personally don't think any of the player handbooks feats are OP, but some are certainly stronger than others. A greater variety and closer balance among feats would have been nice, but you work with what you got. So at this point, what does this person think is OP? I need to know because they just debunked everything. Personally, I think Great Weapon Master is pretty OP. If you see it used in Baldur's Gate 3, I basically don't even use casters anymore, because if I have a barbarian in my build, I don't even need a fighter. I just need the barbarian to go completely ham on anything that exists. Outside of Unearthed Arcana, the only feat I tend to consider OP is the Observant feat. Now this is more of a bias because I tend to play and build settings that are very detailed and require a lot of information to traverse safely. The Observant feat trivializes a lot of the challenge. However, the bias aside, I wouldn't really consider feats from the player handbook overpowered, because they're surprisingly well balanced in your average situation and often make building characters feel a lot more interactive with their powers. Now, it depends a lot on you as a DM. For example, Sharpshooter is a powerful feat for any ranged weapon user, that is, if many of your encounters take place in wide open fields. But it's pretty balanced if you put them in a tight enough space where they can't snipe. Polearm Master and Sentinel are also pretty strong on their own, but they don't get ludicrous until they're combined. That said, the combo can be countered by monsters that can either lock down the PC or pick them apart at range. Basically, no feat is going to be OP on its own. It'll depend on how it interacts with other features and with your style as a DM. Brian Von Vier here, back at it again, checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and of course, let us know down in the comments below, what do you think is actually overpowered as a feat? Not a character trait or anything like that, a feat. Something that you can take at a low or a high level, something that truly defines being overpowered and needs a little bit of balancing. We love you all, please be safe, be happy, and be lucky.